Global corporations today are navigating an era of profound transformation, driven by changing consumer expectations, evolving markets, and long-term sustainability priorities. In this special conversation, the Transformation Playbook, Strategy, Capital, and the Road Ahead, we explore how Philip Morris International is navigating its strategic shift through disciplined capital allocation and a focus on long-term value creation across global markets.
Joining us today is Emmanuel Babeau, Global Chief Financial Officer, Philip Morris International. We also bring you perspectives from Jacek, Group CEO PMI, and Frederic de Wilde, CEO PMI International, as we discuss strategy, financial priorities, and PMI's global transformation. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you for having me, Pooja.
Now, when I take a closer look at your background, I think it's well understood that you've had over 3 decades of work experience, the last 6 at Philip Morris International. What's it like serving as its custodian, essentially, given how fast the regulatory environment is evolving globally?
No, you're absolutely right. These 6 years have been absolutely incredible in terms of speed, energy, and the feeling that we are really changing the world.
Right.
Remember, you still have 1 billion smokers throughout the planet. And during the last 6 years, or last 10 years, we've been coming with this alternative to smoking. And we've been very successful in doing that. So you can imagine the level of positive energy at the company.
So Emmanuel, PMI is in the midst of a dramatic transition, a dramatic transformation, a commitment to harm-reduced products. What are perhaps some of the macro and microeconomic drivers behind this transition?
So the starting point was for us to come with alternative, smoke-free alternative. And we've been developing a number of alternative products that indeed have been very successful. But of course, at the same time, we wanted to do that by developing a business model which was maybe even better than what we were developing on the combustible original business. And we succeeded to do that, developing smoke-free alternative products that are coming with an even higher level of profitability. Well, to a large extent, because of course, we've been investing a lot on this new product, and therefore we are getting the return on this new product. But also because they are even more than the combustible cigarette, differentiated, specific,
right.
And therefore the consumer is ready to pay the right price for it.
And when one reviews the company's recent financial performance, there's a continued commitment to allocating resources towards smoke-free alternatives.
Yeah.
I think that's, fairly obvious. So if you look at Q3 2025, that most recent fiscal performance, how do you evaluate it essentially vis-a-vis your larger global objectives?
Look, I think for me, what is the most striking performance is the fact that when I joined 6 years ago,
right.
People were still saying, you know what, the tobacco industry is, I would say by definition, a declining industry. If you look at the performance for the last 5 years, including the last quarter, we are actually growing volume in the industry. Right. So it's a total turnaround. And the reason why we managed to move back to growth on the volume, it's precisely because we came with this new alternative. We managed to resume growth, on volume, as I said, for the last 5 years,
right.
But also improving the financial performance of the company. Because this product, because they are more differentiated, they provide a different experience to the consumer. They also can come, after all the billions of investment that we made, they come with a better margin. So we have very, very happy consumer, and of course that's the prime target. We also have happy shareholders.
Well, bringing the conversation a bit closer to home, when you look at the company's global growth trajectory and long-term strategic objectives, where does India fit in? How pivotal will this particular market prove to be to Philip Morris International?
Look, India is a big market and will be an even bigger market in the future. So we are absolutely committed to grow our business in India, of course, in full respect of the regulation and the various opportunities that we are facing. Today we are growing nicely with the product we can sell in the country. We certainly hope that we'll be able to continue to develop the business. And we are committed to increase investment in the country with all the opportunity that we'll be able to meet in the country.
Well, at Philip Morris International, evaluating risks falls on your shoulders, as does capital allocation. Correct? So how do you go about striking the right balance when it comes to investing in this emerging smoke-free technology inside of the business vis-a-vis the more traditional bread and butter side of the business?
Look, today we are fully committed to invest on the new business. We are here, we know we are here to unsmoke the world, and we are absolutely uncompromising with this mission. So we want to become a smoke-free company, and therefore you should expect us to make the vast majority of our investment on this smoke-free portfolio. 10 years ago, there was a bet. We didn't know whether it would be successful with the consumer.
Sure.
That's what we thought.
Right.
And it did materialize. We've been very successful with our various new alternatives to smoking. And today, of course, that's where we are making the bulk of our investment. And with, as I explained, a lot of success. If you look at the share price performance for the last years, we've been growing very nicely in line with our financial performance. So I would say, it's not as if it was difficult to decide, okay, do I have the right range of product, to convince the consumer? We know we have it.
Sure.
We know we are differentiated versus a lot of the competition. So we know that with the right level of investment, we're going to be successful.
Well, Emmanuel, I anticipate that perhaps one of the most, challenging yet perhaps rewarding aspects of the role you're in is how quickly regulatory environments are changing. And therefore, how does financial planning and forecasting come into play such that PMI remains resilient through and through?
Look, as you can imagine, we would always hope for an even faster evolution in the environment. So yes, of course, things could move faster, and we are hoping that in each country, people are going to look at science, they're going to look at hard data and saying, yeah, these are better products that are coming, and it should ensure that the consumer know about it.
Right.
But just look at what is happening in the US, which of course is always a market that is giving some interesting perspective.
Sure.
The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, has been working on this new alternative product, this smoke-free product. And they've been for quite a while already saying that some of them were indeed good alternative to combustible product. We already have for some of our product recognition, which is on one side the fact that we can commercialize this product, and it's only coming when they've been doing some very careful study on the impact of this product. We also have for some of our product the capacity to market them, saying that they present whether a reduced risk or a reduced exposure versus the traditional combustible product. So you see that even in a large country such as the United States, you have the regulation progressing well and favoring this move towards this better and smoke-free alternative.
I'm very curious to understand essentially your approach to cost efficiency or optimization across the supply chain, because I imagine that's also an incredibly pivotal part of the role you play.
It is. Finance, of course, would traditionally be known as this is a place where you need to ensure that costs are under control, optimized, which means, of course, working with the best processes, leveraging technology. Right. We're all facing the artificial intelligence revolution, and we'd better cope with that and take that very seriously because it's going to transform a lot of things. The reality is that I take that as a basis for the role, but the real added value for a strong finance function is when you are able to drive actually the top line. So when finance is here to say, okay, what can you do in terms of optimizing investment?
Sure.
Okay, which kind of pricing power do you enjoy? And how do you play with all these elements to be a real helper to foster the growth of the company?
Well,
so you need to combine the two. It's not just about cost. It's also scoring goals, with increasing top line, I would say.
Well, since you brought that up, Emmanuel, how do you expect the finance function specifically, within the four walls of PMI to evolve, vis-a-vis perhaps governance, support for innovation, and long-term strategic objectives?
So finance is here to provide the right analysis, the right prescription in terms of action to help the ultimate decision maker, the CEO if you want, to maximize the performance of the business. It's a big evolution in finance.
Sure.
And it makes, of course, the work much more exciting, I would say. But I don't think that the finance function will be performant on the long term if you don't add this new layer of boosting top line, and be a real, I would say, co-owner of the global performance. Right. And I don't want to forget in this performance the sustainability dimension today. Climate change, fighting, everything around impact on environment, all the work you're doing on ethic, compliance.
Absolutely.
I mean, all this role is critical, and we need to perform very highly as well on that dimension.
And Emmanuel, if I could perhaps ask you one final question. You know, when we look at the industry, there's so much that's going to change, right? The science is going to change, the product is going to change, the policy is going to change, the economics are going to change, and we could perhaps go on and on. What's the one thing perhaps that is going to remain the same?
Well, the fact that the consumer is at the center of all our thoughts. So everything, starts from the consumer. And our success today is nothing by reflecting the fact that we managed to bring to the consumer what he or she was expecting for.
Right.
We are present in more than 100 countries in the world. Different expectation, different view on what should be a great product. But to keep the consumer at the center of everything we do, this, I can tell you, will never change.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with us. We wish
Frida.
you all the continued success.
Thank you again.
Welcome back. As PMI continues to navigate a complex global landscape, leadership vision and execution remains central to its transformation strategy. So let's now hear from Group CEO PMI, Jacek Olczak, on how the company is shaping its long-term strategy and operational priorities.
Philip Morris International often talks about a smoke-free future. But what does that mean in layman language and in concrete terms vis-a-vis your global corporate business model?
Well, it means that we wish to be only a smoke-free company, replaced fully cigarettes, combustible cigarettes, offer consumers a better alternative than a continuing smoking conventional cigarette. Mm. And we're walking the talk, very well. We just not far ago crossed the 40% line of revenue from a smoke-free product. Mm-hmm. There is a massive reallocation of resources that goes behind this product. People, don't know that, 99.5% of our research and development budget is going behind the smoke-free product.
Sure.
That 80% of our commercial spend goes beyond the smoke-free product. Mm-hmm. People don't know, for example, that over the last 10 years, we have not built any single cigarette factory.
Phenomenal.
But we have built 16 smoke-free factories.
Given that India is amongst the top world tobacco user bases, globally, right? I imagine that it's of particular strategic importance to PMI as a company. So how do you eye the Indian opportunity, and where do the most promising opportunities lie?
Well, there is opportunity for us, obviously, due to the underlying size of the market, but I believe it's opportunity for the smokers to address the problem of smoking, and I believe it's an opportunity for a society at large. Mm-hmm. Because 130 million smokers, which we could address the problem at least within 10 years, will have a health impact.
Right.
Okay, or less of a negative health impact, which somehow sinks into the government spending, budgets, etc. So if you, from all angles, if you look, from all perspectives, if you look at the topic, yes, India is very attractive, but I think it should be mutual interest between us as the corporation,
right,
but also society, government, regulators, that we are fighting for the same, which is how to address the problem of smoke.
Absolutely.
But we cannot address this problem by continuing what we are doing over the last 30 years, because then we are on the pathway of 299 years.
Something needs to change, clearly.
Something has to change.
And when we look at India, I think one of the finer nuances amongst many is that it's largely an agrarian economy, right? So what role might science, tech, and innovation play in sustaining and enhancing not just the livelihood of the farming community, but the tobacco industry at large?
Well, these products still rely on the source of the material, tobacco or nicotine, which is naturally occurring in a tobacco product, in the tobacco leaf.
Right.
So we're also looking into how to protect the farmer's job and how to protect, their incomes going forward. Obviously, there is massive impact on the retail community and so on. So the footprint of the tobacco industry historically and today and tomorrow will be very sizable. Needless to say, obviously, that the tobacco is the is quite a significant source of income for the governments in every country in which we operate. The solution requires here that all parties meet, discuss, and exchange their views, their facts, and correct some of the opinions which are based on the on the wrong facts and misunderstanding of the science purpose of this product itself.
If I were to ask you in your personal capacity or in your professional capacity to help characterize what success might mean for Philip Morris International 10 years from now, how would you classify it, not just in terms of corporate growth globally, but societal impact?
Well, we stayed on the course of delivering the smoke-free future. We put ourselves a very ambitious target. By 2030, 2/3 of our top-line revenues should be coming from a smoke-free product.
Sure.
And, we're not resting any day a week into inventing or developing further the products, improving them further, but also talking more to the regulators, opening the markets, but they're still close today and talking to the smokers. But there's a lot of satisfactions coming that, every year where we're adding another millions and millions of smokers which are quitting tobacco and moving to the smoke-free product, is a lot of satisfaction.
Across sectors, Indian companies are driving measurable transformation shaped by policy direction and long-term capital priorities. The government's ethanol blending program has raised petrol blending from around 1.5% in 2014 to 20% by 2025, reducing an estimated 544 lakh tons of carbon emissions and delivering 87,558 crore rupees to farmers and 1,45,930 crore rupees to distillers, aligning energy transition with economic value. In the sugar sector, diversification into biofuels is expanding, with sugarcane-based ethanol playing a growing role in cleaner energy and incremental farm income. At the corporate level, sustainability is now embedded in decision-making. India's top 1,000 listed companies are now mandated to disclose ESG performance, linking sustainability with capital allocation and long-term strategy. In contrast, tobacco remains a major public health challenge. Nearly 29% of adults use tobacco, contributing to about 1.35 million deaths annually, and an economic burden exceeding 1% of GDP. These trends reflect how transformation in India spans energy, agriculture, industry, and public health, shaping more resilient and sustainable outcomes.
At the helm of PMI's transformation is a leadership approach focused on long-term value creation. So let's take a few insights from Frederic de Wilde, CEO, PMI International. Now, Frederic, you're of course part of the management team that has led this transformation towards smoke-free. When it comes to Philip Morris International, it's a huge shift. The industry has watched it with bated breath. How do you essentially manage the complexities of legacy business on the one hand, with the need to innovate by way of reduced risk products on the other?
Look, this journey started more than 20 years ago. And the challenge we were faced with was, could we find products, we were selling cigarettes, could we find products that would reduce the individual risk and the overall societal harm for the population, right?
Sure.
It was an easy question, very complicated challenge.
Right.
And we went in many different directions until we found out that the main issue was combustion, creating thousands of substances, many of those being cancerogenic, right? So the challenge there was, can we find and develop a product that would not burn, but at the same time would satisfy consumers?
Sure.
Because you can develop the best product in the world if you have no consumer acceptance, this would not work, right? And that's what happened when I was in the European Union region. We launched in many countries. We saw quite a nice traction, and the company went all in. We spent $14 billion to develop the science, the product, and launch the product in markets in the last 10 years.
Right.
And in the last quarter, I think 40% of our turnover was coming from this product. So it's an interesting case study. We looked around, very few multinational companies disrupted themselves from the inside as we did.
Frederic, do you believe that the perception around harm reduction products is finally beginning to shift? Are people truly abandoning their cigarettes? And if so, do they perhaps prefer the more traditional alternatives?
Look, I think the perception is shifting, and I can give you some examples.
Please.
Prior to being in Europe, I was president of Japan. So we've introduced a product in Japan some 10 years ago. Today, the cigarette industry, smoking cigarette industry, is half of what it was before. So very huge adherence to these products.
Right.
In the European Union, also these products have made very good inroads. I looked at the numbers recently. In Italy, in Rome, a third, 30%, more than 30% of the tobacco users have moved to these alternatives. Another interesting example is the example of Sweden, where alternatives have been brought to the market like 30 years ago. When you look at the data in Sweden today, Sweden has the lowest smoking incidence rate across all European countries, around 5%. Amongst 20 to 30, it's almost negligible. So this is typically a country where what we put on the table, which was looked at as being very dairy at the time, could we see the end of cigarettes in the world? This is a place where this could happen.
How do you bring about trust and transparency in the messaging, given the diverse range of stakeholders, from consumers, public health advocates, regulators, and the list goes on?
So, look, I think the answer is in the question. I think it's all about transparency. And, you know, we hired around 500 top scientists since we started this adventure and journey about new products, right? And these people didn't join to see more cigarettes being sold.
Right.
They joined there with their ethical standards to make this a reality. Second thing, our science, since we built it more than 10 years ago, is absolutely available. You can go on the net, you can look at our methodologies, at the results we do. But beyond that, since 10 years, we also have state agencies which have reviewed our science or portion of our science, more than 10. I understand there is skepticism. Right. It's a tobacco company coming with its own science. So we've got our science transparent. We've got state agencies looking at it. But there is also more than 750 studies that have been done independently from us on this entire new products that we bring to the market. So I think from that angle, the transparency is there, and therefore the trust is coming. Now, from a consumer standpoint, first of all, I'd like to say that, and this is deeply embedded in our values, people should not smoke. They should not smoke. And if they smoke, they should quit. Unfortunately, some people want to continue smoking or cannot quit. Right. And this is why we are coming with these products, right? Second thing, minors should not have access, should not buy, and should not consume these products. Sure. This is also one of our critical values, things we do every day. People might be skeptical, but we are employees. Most of our employees have children. They don't want their children to see or touch or consume any of the tobacco products. And when we embed this in the way we operate, in our communication, we embed transparency and responsibility, we see that we are moving the needle in many, many places.
Across this conversation, PMI's leadership outlined how transformation today is as much about financial discipline as it is about long-term strategy. From capital allocation and risk management to leadership vision and operational execution, the emphasis remained on building resilience in an increasingly complex global environment. As global markets continue to evolve, the ability to align strategy, governance, and execution has become a defining factor for sustainable value creation. PMI's journey reflects this broader shift underway across global corporations, where change is managed with discipline, clarity, and long-term focus. From boardroom decisions to execution on the ground, this conversation offers a window into how companies are positioning themselves to navigate uncertainty, manage risk, and remain future-ready in a rapidly changing business landscape.
Well, that's a wrap on our special feature, the Transformation Playbook, Strategy, Capital, and the Road Ahead. I'm Pooja Jain signing off, but stay tuned to ET Now for more insights on global business and leadership. Thanks for watching.